Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the dusty hush of an ancient world. The kind with no ticking clocks, no glowing screens, just the low hum of river winds and the slow breath of clay. You wake not to an alarm, but to the amber hush of dawn brushing across baked mud walls and reed-woven rooftops. Babylon, somewhere between myth and memory. Your mat smells of dust and warm fabric. A rooster is already yelling at the horizon. And across the courtyard, a pot clinks against stone as your neighbor begins their day. The sun hasn't climbed the temple stairs yet, but people here rise not by timepieces, but by the pulse of the city itself, which, to be fair, is somehow more punctual than your calendar app you stretch. Slowly, because everything here moves like syrup in the morning, and because you've heard the schedule today includes sun watching and maybe a time argument or two. In Babylon, time isn't just kept. It's debated, rewritten, worshipped. You'll see.so before you get comfortable. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and what time it is where you're listening. I love seeing where these sleepy journeys reach. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle into the street barefoot. The city is already alive. Not loud, just steady. Sandals on stone, oxen groaning, children chasing a cat that's already over it. And you're off to meet a priest who insists the day has officially begun, even though you suspect he just wants to skip chores. The priest, bearded and proud, points to the rising light and declares the morning auspicious. You nod, unsure if that means something lucky will happen or if he's just showing off. He leads you to a public square, wide and sun-bleached, where a tall stone pillar rises like a sundial with delusions of grandeur. He says the city wakes with the shadow. As the sun creeps higher, the pillar's shadow shortens. And that, apparently, tells everyone what to do. When the shadow touches that tile, he whispers, "The bakers must light their ovens." You squint at the shadow. It's touching 3 tiles. He shrugs. Sometimes the gods aren't precise. You walk further, watching as vendors set up stalls, not by hour but by habit. The guy who sells lentils arrives before the guy with the fish. Always, the temple singers begin their chants when the sun hits the 3rd window of the ziggurat, not because anyone told them, but because they've always done it. And yet, no one seems confused. Everyone just knows. It's as if the city itself is a slow-moving watch, each person a ticking cog. You pause near a scribal apprentice brushing dust from a wet clay tablet. He's writing down what time the stars dipped below the horizon last night. You ask why. To know when to wake, he says, as if it's obvious. You ask what if the stars are hidden? Then you oversleep, he says, smiling. Historians still argue whether ancient Babylonians truly lived by star-structured schedules, or if they used them more ceremonially. Either way, they wrote it all down. Hundreds of tablets exist with sunrise, sunset, moon phases, and the rare and special, when Venus looked kind of annoyed. You pass an old woman feeding pigeons, her hands wrinkled and wise. She tells you that when she was a girl, she used to guess time by how far her shadow reached. But then I got taller, she says. It ruined everything. You laughed at a small boy runs past shouting, "It's 1:15. No one blinks. That's how it goes in Babylon. Time here doesn't tick.it leans.it stretches.it settles like dust between your fingers. And even though no one's carrying a sundial in their pocket, the entire city is somehow right on schedule. The square is heating up, and so is the priest's commentary. You follow him across the stone courtyard, where a tall gnomon, just a fancy word for that stick casting a shadow, is planted in a small patch of smooth, swept earth. This is no ordinary sunstick. This is an official shadow calculator, approved by temple scribes and probably the god Shamash himself. He gestures dramatically. This, he says, divides the heavens. You squint. It divides exactly nothing. But the way his robes swish as he steps back and forth around the shadow's tip, you suspect this isn't about clarity. It's about performance. The Babylonians were obsessed with shadows. Not because they were scared of them, well, not mostly, but because they made the sky legible. Each hour, as the sun moved, The shadow lengthened or shrank, and those changes were tracked with careful carvings into the dust. You watch as the priest smooths the sand with a bronze-tipped stylus and marks the end of the current shadow. 1 hour, he declares. You glance up. The sun has barely moved. Roughly, he adds, people begin to gather. Not for the time, but for the spectacle. Shadow watching is surprisingly social. Someone brings dates. Someone else brings their cousin, who's learning to read shadows and wants to impress. You sit cross-legged nearby, chewing a sweet date and watching this drama unfold. The shadow shifts a finger's width. Another mark. A cheer. 2 hours, someone yells. Or 1 and a bit. Historians still debate how precise Babylonian sundials were. Some argue they were accurate to 15 minutes. Others say they were more symbolic, a kind of sky sundial poetry. But regardless, the community believed in them. They watched the shadows like we watch microwave timers. Obsessively, hungrily, and with the occasional impatient mutter. You notice something else. Not everyone agrees on where the shadow ends. One man insists it touches the 6th tile. The priest insists it's on the 5th. A small boy loudly says 7 just to cause chaos. It spirals into a debate. Not a fight, this is Babylon, not Twitter, but a polite, increasingly animated back and forth about whether long robes distort judgment. Someone fetches a ruler. Another fetches a larger ruler. It's starting to feel like a wedding. If the bride were a shadow and everyone wanted custody. You whisper to the scribe beside you, "Why 60?" He smirks. 60 is a perfect number. Divides beautifully, like dough. Or arguments. Babylonians loved 60. Their number system, sexagesimal, is built around it. That's why we have 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle, and a general sense of mathematical regret. The priest finally declares the shadow to be approximately 5th tile adjacent. Everyone nods solemnly, which you realize is ancient Babylonian for, "Let's all pretend we agree." You get up and walk across the square toward the temple steps. On the way, you pass a merchant rearranging spices by the sun's position. "If the cumin glows," he says, "it's the 3rd hour." That tracks. You pass another who's using a stick in a bowl of water to chart time. The shadow cuts through the water's reflection. It looks oddly precise and poetic. You ask why he doesn't use the gnomon. He shrugs. "That thing's always off." You grin. Even in a world where time came from heaven, people still didn't trust the clock. As the sun climbs higher, the shadows shorten and the heat deepens. The marketplace begins to stir more urgently. Vendors yell louder. Donkeys sigh harder. A girl leads a goose through the crowd, the bird quacking like it's late for something. You follow its honking lead until you find shade beneath a palm awning and sit. A shadow inches past your toes. Time moves on, and no one agrees what time it is. You're sitting in the shade of the temple wall, chewing lazily on a piece of barley bread, when it happens again. The priest starts mumbling numbers under his breath, 60, 12, 30, back to 60. He's not summoning spirits. He's just doing Babylonian math, which is basically the same thing. Babylon didn't invent counting, but it gave numbers personality. Here, numbers don't just count things, they shape reality. And none are more sacred, more practical, more absurdly persistent than 60. You stand and wander over, peering at a clay tablet he's holding. A grid of wedge marks, grouped in neat little bunches. 60, he says, as if it explains the universe. Which, to be fair, it kind of does. Why 60? Why not 10 like normal people? He raises an eyebrow. Because 60 listens, right? Turns out, the Babylonians adored 60 because it's cooperative. You can divide it by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. It's like the most sociable number at the party. Easy to break up into smaller pieces, never awkward, never refusing to share. You pick up a stylus and try for yourself. The clay is warm, the marks satisfying. You carve a little circle, divide it into 6, then 12, then 24. Before long, you've drawn a clock without knowing it. Historians agree the Babylonian-based 60 system is one of the most enduring inventions in human history. But they still debate where it came from. Was it Sumerians? Did it evolve from finger joints, 12 phalanges per hand? 5 fingers on the other for counting dozens? No one knows. But you do know it's elegant. The priest shows you how to mark hours using 60 as the base, each hour divided into 60 bits, each bit into smaller 60ths. It gets dizzying fast. Somewhere around 42 60ths past the third hour. You stop pretending to follow and start nodding like the clay tablet is telling secrets. Others join in. A young scribe offers a joke. A man with 60 sheep walks into a temple. But the punchline gets lost in a debate about whether 60 sheep is actually 6 tens or one powerful number. You learn the day is divided into 12 hours of daylight and 12 of night, but that those hours stretch and shrink with the seasons. A winter hour might be shorter than your midday nap. A summer one might last forever. Isn't that confusing? You ask. The priest shrugs. Only if you care what time it is. You begin to understand. In Babylon, time isn't measured. It's interpreted. It's a fluid thing, like the Tigris, structured by convention, but meandering in practice. You walk along the temple wall, where a small tablet is drying in the sun. It shows a lunar calendar with days marked in groups of 30. The moon was another favorite time tool. Came back every month, mostly on time, and never argued with priests. Mostly, you glance up at the sun again. The shadow now touches a different tile. You point it out. The priest frowns. Is that the 5th or the 6th? You don't answer. You just smile. Back near the garden, a child plays with pebbles, arranging them in groups of 6, then 5 groups of 6, then 60 total. You realize, this number isn't just arithmetic. It's embedded in daily life. Time, trade, distance. All bowed to 60. Even the gods seem to respect it. And as you sit back down beneath the rustling reeds, you start to notice the rhythms. Not digital, not strict, just fluid pulses. Sun above, shadows shifting, chants rising, sleepy merchants opening sacks. The universe ticking not by seconds, but by 60ths. The priest yawns beside you and mutters, "We could have picked 10. You chuckle. But you're glad they didn't. Your fingers are still smudged with drying clay as you step through the threshold of the temple school, where the air hums with quiet concentration and the occasional frustrated groan. Inside, a dozen scribes in training are hunched over low tables, each scratching wedge-shaped symbols into soft, damp tablets. It's like a math class, if math included more gods, more heat, and fewer chairs. You sit cross-legged beside a nervous-looking apprentice. He's maybe 12, maybe 30, it's hard to tell with all the worry lines. He mutters numbers under his breath. 6 parts of 60, twice past the third. Oh no. His stylus trembles. What are you working on? You ask. A time chart, he says, staring at the clay like it's trying to bite him. Dividing the night into thirds, then thirds into 60ths, then 60ths into... Sigh. You glance over his shoulder. His tablet is an abstract masterpiece of symbols and uncertainty. It shows a table of watches, the night hours tracked by guards, astronomers, and anyone trying to not oversleep and anger the moon. The Babylonian day, as you're learning, was less about hours and more about moments. Night wasn't just dark. It was divided into 3 watches, each marked by rising stars, shifting winds, and changes in the rhythm of the city. And each of those watches, breakable into 60 smaller, not quite minutes. You try carving a few numbers yourself. 60, 30, 12. They feel familiar, even though you've never seen them shaped like this. It's like someone rearranged math to be mysterious on purpose. The scribe master walks by and glances at your work. Not bad, he mutters. If you like chaos. You nod. Big fan. In one corner, a student is working on a water clock diagram. It's shaped like a bowl with a tiny hole. As water drips out, time is counted. You ask how it works. He shrugs. It leaks. Time passes. A fair metaphor for life. Historians still argue whether Babylonian scribes truly measured time down to the level we think of as seconds. Some evidence suggests they did, at least when watching stars or timing ceremonies. Others say these smaller divisions were symbolic, theoretical, the math of philosophers more than timekeepers. You're starting to believe both are true. As the class continues, students rotate through different tablets. Some mark sunrise data, Others draw lunar cycles. One poor soul is trying to calculate leap months and looks like he might cry out. You're handed a new assignment. Determine when the moon will vanish next. No pressure. You stare at the chart. Lunar months vary after all. Some are 29 days, some 30. The priest says the gods decide. The scribe master says the stars decide. A kid in the back whispers that the answer is, when the moon gets bored. You decide to guess. You scribble maybe on the 27th and draw a tiny moon with a frown. The master doesn't approve, but he doesn't fail you either. At the back of the room, one student is carving a multiplication table for time. How many 60ths in 6 hours? How many hours in a day? How many days in a month? You realize these people didn't just invent time, they designed it. Like artists. Outside, a bell made of bronze hums in the wind. Class is over. You wipe your hands, tuck the stylus behind your ear, and step back into the sun. Time moves differently now. Less like a ticking sound, more like a slow breath. And every time you blink, you swear you see a little wedge-shaped number float by. You're standing at the base of a ziggurat as dusk spills over Babylon like warm wine. The steps rise steeply above you, layered stone leading skyward, a giant stairway to the stars. You squint up. There's someone already at the top, arms outstretched, whispering to the wind. It's star-watching time. You climb slowly. The steps are broad, sun-warmed, and uneven. You pass another priest on the way down who mutters, Venus is late. Like it's a perfectly normal thing to complain about. At the summit, a group of astronomer priests are already deep in discussion, eyes fixed on the horizon. You sit cross-legged, heart thumping from the climb, and look up. The sky here feels bigger. Purple deepens into indigo. One by one, stars pierce through the haze. A planet glows faintly above the palm trees. Someone points. Mars, they whisper. Redder than usual. You lean back and listen. These priests don't just watch the sky. They read it. Each star has meaning. Each movement is part of a message. You're told that certain constellations mark time not just for days, but for destinies. That Venus, in particular, is a diva, brilliant, moody, and extremely punctual. Except when she isn't. Babylonian astronomers tracked Venus obsessively. The Venus tablets recorded her appearances and disappearances over decades. But even with all that effort, they sometimes got it wrong. Tonight might be one of those times. Venus still hasn't shown. The priests squint harder. One insists she'll appear near the temple spire. Another says just left of the goat star. A third is chewing his stylus like it's stress relief. Historians still argue whether Babylonians used astronomy purely for divination or if they understood the math behind the motions. The truth, like Venus tonight, flickers in and out. You look down at a clay tablet inscribed with tiny cuneiform notes. Times, angles, moon phases. There's a diagram of constellations and a note. If Venus is delayed, it bodes rain. Or goats. You don't ask. Suddenly, someone gasps. There she is. A pale spark low on the horizon, rising like a breath. The priests exhale together. You feel the entire ziggurat relax. You whisper, she's late. A scribe grins. She's fashionably late. And just like that, the chart is updated. Time measured not by gears or bells, but by the reluctant glamour of a celestial guest. The stars brighten. A thin moon curls overhead like a smile. Someone offers you a dried fig and points to the twin stars of Gemini. This one rises when spring begins, he says. Unless it rains. You nod. Out here, time is written in starlight. And sometimes, even the stars argue about what time it is. You sit in silence, the ziggurats solid beneath you, the universe dancing above. The city below fades into shadows, and your night watch has just begun. You're still on the ziggurat when the voices rise, low at first, then sharper. One priest jabs a finger toward the eastern horizon. Another slaps a clay tablet with theatrical flair. A third just mutters, not again. An argument is brewing. It's about the moon. Specifically, whether last night's observation was off by a day, which would mean this entire month is wrong. You quietly scoot back to the edge of the stone platform, nibbling the last of your fig while trying to look invisible. But it's too late. The bickering has turned cosmic. Your star list is outdated, says one priest, waving a stylus like a weapon. Your angle was off by 2 fingers, snaps another, holding up his hand in demonstration. The clouds were thick, mumbles a third, gesturing vaguely at the sky, which, tonight, is perfectly clear and unhelpful. This isn't just a casual mistake. Lunar months are sacred. If the moon wasn't seen on the right night, then maybe yesterday wasn't the first of the month. And if that's true, then the holy day celebrated yesterday was premature, which means they may have accidentally offended a god. Oops. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians used fixed lunar calendars or adjusted them based on actual sky sightings. Most agree they tried to be precise, but when weather and human error mixed, things got messy. Records show that sometimes a month had to be backdated after the fact. Awkward, but apparently survivable. One priest now insists they need to redo the festival, reoffer the incense, re-sing the hymn. Another priest, eyes tired, simply says, "The god probably wasn't looking." You stifle a laugh. They bicker for a while longer, then finally agree on a compromise. The festival counted unless Venus appears earlier than expected tomorrow, which, given Venus' mood swings, is a firm maybe. You descend the ziggurat in the dark, firelight flickering below. The streets are quiet now. Clay lanterns glow at doorways. A lone donkey sighs like it's been personally offended by the moon as you pass the temple entrance. You spot a pair of scribes quietly scraping fresh dates off a dried tablet. Redoing the calendar, one explains. Just in case. You nod solemnly. Just in case. You head toward your sleeping mat, head full of constellations and corrections. But you stop at a small shrine built into the corner of a courtyard. It's dedicated to Sin, the moon god. You leave a pebble there. Not for blessing, for forgiveness. If he was watching, you figure he deserves at least a nod. The sky above is utterly silent. The stars unmoved by the squabbles below. Time, it seems, is a negotiation. Especially when the moon is involved. You finally lie down, the cool clay beneath you and the slow rhythm of Babylon curling softly into sleep. You wake to the sound of dripping water. Not from the sky, but from a pot. A slow, rhythmic plop, 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 like time itself is trying to annoy you on purpose. It's a clepsydra at a water clock. You shuffle over to the courtyard's edge where an elderly artisan, hair like sun-bleached straw, is carefully adjusting a small ceramic vessel with a pinhole at its base. Another, larger jar waits to catch the water. She leaks like a priest's promise. He mutters, then grins. You sit beside him, watching. He offers you a figure. You accept. No sense arguing with a man who measures the day in drips. Unlike sundials, which depend on the sun and, frankly, optimism, the clepsydra works even when clouds or night get in the way. It's reliable, in theory, if you ignore evaporation, mineral buildup, shifting air pressure, bad clay, poor carving, and curious cats. This one's old but proud. Etchings on the side mark rough time intervals. One line might mean an hour, or half an hour, or time to turn the stew. Depends on how fast it leaks today, the artisan says, holding it up to squint through the hole. Humid mornings throw it off. He explains that these clocks are used indoors, often in temples to time rituals or in courtrooms to time arguments. If your case took longer than a jar of water to empty, too bad. Justice runs dry. You take a turn, filling the jar slowly with a jug. The water spirals down like a secret. As it starts dripping again, the artisan begins carving a new line into the clay. It's not exactly the same as yesterday, he admits, but neither is the sun. Historians still argue whether clepsydras in Babylon were ceremonial or functional. Some believe they timed prayers, others think they helped divide the night into watches. There are even rumors of complex multi-vessel setups, where one jar filled while another emptied, a water symphony of sorts. This one's simpler, but you're mesmerized. You and the artisan sit in silence for a while, listening to the rhythm. Plop, plop, plop. The world narrows to that single, quiet beat. Then, of course, the pot slips, water splashes. The artisan curses in a whisper that somehow sounds polite. Well, he sighs. Guess it's lunchtime. You help refill the jar. He offers you a bite of flatbread and a smirk. This is why we have the sun, he says, and the stars, and guesses. You ask why people still bother with clocks that leak. He shrugs. It's not about being right. It's about agreeing we're wrong together. You smile. You return later with a second clay vessel, trying to make your own. The artisan watches like a proud but suspicious uncle. You carve your first line too shallow, your second one too crooked. It'll do, he says anyway, as long as you don't put anything important on it. You carry it home like treasure. Not a timepiece, a time partner, a reminder that measurement is as much about feel as it is about math. And as it leaks onto your windowsill through the evening, you find yourself relaxing with each plop. Maybe time isn't something to track. Maybe it's something to drip. It's midday or close enough, and your stomach is staging a protest. You follow the smell of lentils and cumin to the temple kitchen courtyard, where something stew-like simmers in a clay pot over a glowing fire. A line of people has formed, not in strict order, but in a kind of time-based hierarchy. Early risers up front, late sleepers somewhere near the back, and you, time tourist, slotted politely in the middle. And yet, despite the clear physical evidence, sizzling food, impatient bellies, one guy already holding a spoon, a priest suddenly proclaims, "It is not yet midday." Silence. Everyone looks around. The sun is nearly overhead. The shadow of the ziggurat is tiny, huddled near its base like a sleepy cat. A bird flaps by in perfect comedic timing. But someone ventures. My stomach says otherwise. The priest gestures to a sundial etched into the courtyard stones. Its shadow points awkwardly between markers. The hour has not landed, he says. You look at the pot. You look at the sun. You look at the shadow, which is so short it could be described as a suggestion. Welcome to a temple debate over lunchtimes. What began as a casual meal is now a ritual dispute. Should lunch begin when the sun reaches its zenith? Or when the shadow of the courtyard marker disappears completely? Or when the stew smells just right? Two junior priests offer competing interpretations. One says noon began 3 minutes ago. The other says in 5. A third argues that any shadow, no matter how faint, invalidates the time. You chew your fig slowly. This may take a while. Historians still debate how precisely Babylonian priests timed rituals. Some evidence suggests they tracked solar midpoints obsessively. Others believe it was more fluid, based on local agreement and symbolic consistency. In other words, even in the temple, sometimes you just argued until someone gave up and ate, which is exactly what happens. An older woman, clearly fed up, scoops herself a bowl and mutters, "Shamash won't mind." That breaks the spell. Bowls are filled, murmurs resume, and the debate is forgotten. At least until tomorrow. You eat seated on a woven mat, the stew surprisingly spicy, your wooden spoon still warm from the sun. Someone beside you jokes that time is like soup. Better when shared, dangerous if left unattended. As the meal winds down, another priest sidles up with a fresh clay tablet. He's drafting a proposal to rename the hour markers based on food smells. First stew, half bread, and belch o'clock. You offer shadow of the lentil pot. He approves. You drift away as the sun inches westward, the courtyard quieter now, save for a few belated arguments about spice levels. The sundial, for what it's worth, finally reaches its midpoint that no one notices, because lunch already happened. And in Babylon, that's all the confirmation you need. Afternoon slouches in with a golden haze, and you find yourself standing outside the royal court, where men in embroidered robes murmur beneath towering stone columns. Something's going on. The guards at the gate look unusually alert. One priest passes you muttering, "He's doing it again." You slip into the back of the courtyard just in time to witness a peculiar sort of emergency. The king wants a new month. Yes, another one. Apparently, the calendar is off again. Crops are misaligned with feasts. The barley is sulking. Merchants are yelling about lost sales. And, most importantly, the high priest has delivered a clay tablet that says, in no uncertain terms, "This year has too much moon. The solution: insert a leap month." Just Make a new one. Like bonus fries at the bottom of the bag, but with more incense. You watch as royal astrologers cluster in tight circles, muttering about cycles, shadows, and omens. One of them insists it's too soon since the last leap month. Another says the gods will understand if it's for administrative clarity. A third keeps scribbling numbers into the dirt and wiping them out again with increasing frustration. Historians still argue about how intercalation, the adding of leap months, worked in Babylon. Some say it followed strict astronomical rules, others believe it was flexible, even political. What's clear is this: when the math broke down, someone had to decide whether time needed more time. You inch closer to the scribes, peeking at their chart. It's a wheel of months and signs, etched with names like Nisanu, Duzu, and Ataru. The lines between them are sharp, but apparently optional. The king, lounging under a painted canopy, finally lifts a hand. He yawns and says, "Call it second Ulialu." The scribes nod. Clay tablets are adjusted. Time itself shifts by decree. You blink. It's now Ulialu 2, just like that. The merchants grumble, the priests smile, and a man in the back begins writing a song to celebrate the freshly blessed bonus days. You leave the courtyard dazed. Adding a whole month feels like cheating, but also genius. Imagine being able to just invent time when you're behind on things. You pass a boy carving Ulialu 2 into a tablet. He frowns. "We just finished Ulialu," he mutters. You nod. "This one's new." Later that evening, the temple bell rings at the wrong time. You look to the priest. He shrugs. "We're all catching up now. The stars don't mind. The barley doesn't mind. And honestly, neither do you." You're walking beside the Tigris now, feet kicking at reeds, the water slow and lazy in the afternoon sun. Behind you, the ziggurat towers in the haze. But out here it's quiet. No priests arguing. No star charts or dripping pots. Just earth, water, and the creak of a farmer's cart that a man in a wide reed hat waves you over. His hands are calloused, stained with mud. His tunic is rolled to the knees. "You from the temple?" he asks, squinting. You nod. He grunts. "Figures. You lot are always late for the floods." You join him in the field, where barley stalks sway like dancers, their heads golden and whispering. He shows you a row of tiny clay markers, spaced along the bank. "This is my calendar," he says, tapping one with his staff. "The water rises to here, time to sow. Over that one, time to wait. No nomons.no moon charts. Just river, patience, and memory." The Babylonian priests may have invented timekeeping, but the farmers lived by a different rhythm, one not carved into clay, but into mud. Flood cycles, seed rotations, and the angle of the sun on a neighbor's roof told them what they needed to know. He points to a bush heavy with figs. "That's how you know it's nearly the 10th month. Fig blooms mean goats get restless." You ask if he ever uses the temple calendar. He snorts. "Sure, when it rains incense." Then, softening, he adds, "I check it for feast days. Good excuse to rest the ox." Historians still explore the tension between elite time and local time in ancient civilizations. There's evidence that while temple records tracked celestial events obsessively, rural communities often ignored them or adjusted them to fit the realities of survival. You sit on a rock while the farmer unrolls a basket of dried fish. He offers you one. You accept. He points across the water. "See that notch on the far bank? When the river touches that, I know I'm 2 weeks from harvest. If it passes it, too late. Flood'll ruin everything." You squint. The notch is tiny, invisible to anyone not raised on riverbanks. You ask how long he's used it. He shrugs. "It was here before me." You glance at the sky, then at the shadow of a reed against your foot. Somewhere back in the city, a priest is adjusting a sundial and frowning. But out here, time just is. As the sun dips lower, you help the farmer collect reeds. He hums while working, some tune about oxen and onions. You ask the time. He looks up. 2 fish shadows past fig rise, he says. You nod, like that makes sense. It does. Actually, as you walk back toward Babylon, the city seems to pulse with a different kind of rhythm now. Less strict, more earthy. You pass another field, where children chase frogs with clay pots. Point one yells, "Hurry! It's nearly frog moon." You smile. Maybe they're not wrong. You return to the city under a velvet dusk, just in time to hear temple bells mark the sacred seventh. But before you can even ask what that means, a man selling roasted chickpeas whispers, "Seven, always seven. The gods like it that way." He hands you a handful for free, then disappears into the alley like a prophet in sandals. You nibble on the chickpeas and follow the sound of music into a smaller courtyard near the temple. A group has gathered, merchants, servants, even a priest or two, all seated in a circle beneath an olive tree. They're singing softly. Someone plucks a lyre. Someone else claps slowly, like counting time not in seconds, but in mood. It's the seventh day. A woman beside you says, her voice barely above the music, "A rest day." You nod slowly. "Because of the gods?" She nods back. "Because of the stars." The Babylonians believed in the sacredness of seven, not just as a lucky number, but as a celestial mandate. 7 visible planets, 7 major gods, 7 days in the phases of the moon, 7 chances, 7 fates, 7 days of the week. You ask when the week actually starts. A nearby scribe shrugs. That depends on who you ask. Historians still debate when and how the 7-day week solidified in Mesopotamia. Was it always formal? Was it tied directly to lunar cycles? Or was it more ritual than rule? An agreement among the cosmos and communities to pause every now and then. Here, in this moment, it feels more spiritual than scheduled. A storyteller begins to chant. His tale is of Enki, god of wisdom, and how he built the 7 days from pieces of night and song. Each day was gifted a mood, a duty, and a secret name. One day sings, another sleeps, the 5th one stares out to sea. And the 7th? The 7th listens. You lean back against a clay wall, chickpeas finished, and close your eyes. You start to hear the rhythm of the city, water ladles dripping, footsteps soft, a rooster sounding confused. In Babylon. 7 is less of a count and more of a pulse. A priest in the corner hums as he draws a circle in the sand, dividing it into 7 slices. Each slice gets a god. One gets a figure, one gets a headache. One, inexplicably, gets goats. You do not question it. As the stars bloom above, people begin to slip away, quietly, reverently. You walk the edge of the courtyard and find a carved plaque near the gate. It's faded, but you can still read it. "May the 7th be your breath." You exhale long and slow. Time is counting again. But now you're part of the rhythm. The next morning, you wander through Babylon's great market, the kind of place where you can buy a loaf of bread, a goat, a blessing, and possibly a small curse if you offend the wrong stall. The air smells like sesame, sweat, and ambition. And though no one wears a watch, everything is running on time. Sort of. You stop at a spice vendor arranging his jars in a perfect arc. He grins and says, "It's the 3rd bean of the 6th hour." You blink, unsure whether that's a real measure of time or a poetic flex. He just laughs. In the market, time works differently. Not by stars or shadows, but by transactions. The day doesn't begin when the sun rises. It begins when the first customer haggles over garlic. You walk past a wool seller yelling, "2 bolts for the price of 1. Before sun tilt, a butcher waves a cleaver, announcing, "Fresh meat until goat shadow." You're pretty sure that's noon? Maybe. One woman selling oil keeps time by sales. "Every 10 jugs, I turn the cloth," she says, gesturing to a bright square of linen shading her cart. 3 cloth turns and I go home. There's a rhythm here, an economic clock. It ticks forward with each coin dropped, each olive sampled, each argument won or lost. It's fast, efficient, and entirely disconnected from what the temple priests are doing 5 blocks away. You meet a baker who scoffs at the idea of priest time. "They wait for Venus. I wait for the dough to rise." She pulls a loaf from her oven and places it gently on a cloth. "My hour," she says, "is when this crust sings." Historians still note the divide between divine time and daily time in Mesopotamian society. Priests watched the stars, but markets watched the people. Time in the streets was measured in foot traffic, shade length, and how long it took to sell a pot of honey. You pause at a corner where an old man is counting beans into piles. "This many beans," he says, pointing to one pile. "To walk to the temple. Twice this," pointing to another. "To stand in line and ask for forgiveness." "How do you know?" you ask. He grins. "Because I've sinned a lot." You make your way toward a cloth merchant who waves you over with urgency. "You want the midday price?" he asks. "Or the early morning one, but at a late morning discount?" You don't answer. You're still calculating goat shadows in your head. In the middle of the market. Someone rings a bell, and no one stops. The baker keeps baking. The spice vendor haggles over cinnamon. The woman with the cloth shade flips it again and shouts, "Second turn!" You realize here time is a loop, not a line. It's a rhythm danced to by people who don't care if Venus rises late, as long as the onions are ripe. You leave the market with a pouch of figs and a new respect for the merchant's calendar. It may not be carved in stone, but it's written on every face, every price, every promise. And as you pass under a hanging lantern, flickering in the warm breeze, you whisper, "Goat shadow, definitely noon." You're halfway back to the temple when the sky goes wrong. Not just cloudy wrong. Not "oh no, a breeze during prayers" wrong. Eclipse wrong. The sun dims, slowly, then suddenly, and the street freezes. A dog whines. A fig seller clutches his basket. A priest near the gates shouts, "Shadow devours the sun." You glance up. A thin black curve bites into the sun's golden face, and a ripple of collective unease spreads through the crowd like spilled oil. Someone drops a melon. It rolls across the stones in eerie silence. An eclipse wasn't just an astronomical event in Babylon. It was a celestial message, and often, not a kind one. You follow the growing murmurs to the temple square, where astronomer priests have already begun panicking, but in an extremely professional manner. One is flipping through clay tablets. Another is sketching angles in dust. A third is praying, but in a voice that sounds more like bargaining. "This was supposed to be tomorrow," a scribe mutters. "The chart said tomorrow." A different priest adds, "We prepared the offerings. The goat was ready. We cannot recycle the goat." You quietly step back. Historians still argue whether Babylonian astronomers could accurately predict eclipses. Evidence suggests they had some idea, especially with lunar events, but solar eclipses were trickier, especially partial ones. And this one, it's early, or wrong, or divine improv. As the light continues to fade, a boy runs by screaming, "It's the end!" A vendor yells after him, "Not until I sell this last basket of pomegranates." You find a priest trying to recalibrate a water clock, hoping the eclipse might at least line up with something measurable. No luck. The shadow moves faster than time itself. You ask, gently, "What does it mean?" He sighs, "It means we all argued about the wrong chart." Another priest insists they must declare a citywide fast. A merchant argues they should declare a half-day sale instead. A very tired guard asks if anyone has seen his goat, which, it turns out, has wandered into the temple kitchen and is now standing proudly on a sacrificial table. It's that kind of afternoon. Eventually, the eclipse reaches its peak. The sun is a blackened disk, ringed in gold. The city holds its breath, and then, slowly, it passes. Light returns. A rooster crows, belated and confused. The pomegranate vendor yells, "Still here!" You exhale. The priests call for a meeting. Another clay tablet is re-etched. The festival calendar shifts. Again. You suspect someone's going to add an extra prayer to the next moonrise, just to be safe as you walk away. A child points to the sky and whispers, "That was spooky." You nod. Spooky and ahead of schedule. In Babylon, time is supposed to behave, and when it doesn't, everyone argues, then adjusts, then probably fasts, just in case. It's late afternoon when you step into the cool, echoing walls of the scribal school once again. Just in time for exam day. The students are pale. Not with illness, but with terror. At the front of the chamber stands a tall, robed instructor with a tablet tucked under one arm and a look on his face that says, "Today is your reckoning." He raps a stylus on the stone floor. "Time division," he says. Full chart. Night watches. Begin. A collective groan rises like a ritual chant. One student nearly drops his stylus. Another mutters, "Why couldn't we just be barley farmers?" You find a spot at the back, quietly joining a student who's chewing his lower lip like it owes him money. On the table in front of him, a blank clay tablet. Damp. Waiting. Judgmental, he whispers, "I always get the third watch wrong." You lean in. "Which one is that?" He sighs. "That's the problem. Babylonian time wasn't measured in hours like ours. Not really. The day was divided by the sun and the shadow, sure. But the night? That belonged to the watches. 3 long stretches of darkness, each ruled by different stars, gods, and degrees of personal confusion. The first watch, early night, moonrise. The second, deep night when most slept. The third, pre-dawn when people dreamed and time bent. The exam. Break the night into thirds, then thirds into 60ths. Then calculate how many of those 60ths fall before the second rooster crow. Yeah, point one student carves confidently. Another stares at his tablet like it just insulted his family. The instructor strolls by, peeking at each attempt. He stops at a girl who's drawn her whole chart as a circle instead of a rectangle. He raises an eyebrow. Interesting interpretation. She shrugs. Time is round. He grunts, moves on. Historians note that Babylonian education was rigorous, especially for scribes. Timekeeping, astronomy, and arithmetic were tightly interwoven. Students had to learn not just how to divide, but how to translate time into ritual, meaning, and social order. One boy scratches a last-minute correction and accidentally smears his earlier work. His face falls. You whisper, "Just tell them it's a lunar distortion." He laughs, grateful. A girl near the front is reciting planetary periods under her breath like a spell. Venus, 584. Mars, 780. You wonder if anyone ever passed one of these without crying. Finally, the stylus taps again. Time's up. Literally. The students stand, tablets raised like shields. The instructor collects them, unreadable. Somewhere outside, a bell rings late. You all look up. The instructor frowns. "See," he mutters. "Should have started the second watch early." You step out with the students, the air warm and forgiving. One boy wipes sweat from his brow and says, "Only 19 more exams until I'm allowed to copy receipts." Another adds, "Or write prayers for fish deliveries." You leave the courtyard quietly, thinking, for a society that worships stars and shadow, they sure made time feel like math class. But you also understand now. Every tick, every smear of clay.it matters. Because in Babylon, time wasn't just to be known. It was to be mastered. You're crouched beneath a broken archway just past the temple wall, squinting at a sundial that's wrong. No, not dramatically wrong. Not the moon fell into the Tigris wrong, but wrong enough to cause a stir. The shadow is off by a finger's width. Not catastrophic, not cosmic, but troubling to a city that's carved calendars from starlight. A priest is circling the sundial like it personally offended him. He mutters calculations under his breath. "Tilted," he says, "or shifted." Another priest joins him, examining the angle of the gnomon. "It was trued last summer," he insists. Last summer it wasn't winter, the first counters? The problem? Sundials work differently as the seasons shift. The sun's arc stretches in summer, shrinks in winter. What cast a perfect noon shadow in July now lies lazy and distorted. The priest sighs. You offer helpfully, "Maybe time's just in a bad mood." He doesn't laugh, so begins the ancient and noble ritual of realigning the sundial, which involves 3 styluses, a loop of string, 6 sun-bleached tablets, and no small amount of finger-pointing. The temple assistant suggests turning the base slightly east. The head scribe demands an offering first, just in case it angers the hour. They try lining it up with a nearby shadow cast by a statue of a lion-headed god. That goes poorly. The lion is accused of being smug. A young boy, watching, says, "Why not just use a water clock?" Everyone glares at him. Historians still debate how accurate Babylonian sundials were, especially across seasons. They were sophisticated for their time, but without adjustments for axial tilt or latitude, they could drift. There's evidence of seasonal realignments, sometimes done carefully, sometimes, like this. Eventually, the priests decide to move the gnomon by a thumb's width and carve a new line labeled winter median. Someone suggests adding a footnote, valid through 12th of Tebetu. Everyone agrees that sounds official. They mark the correction. Someone whispers, "What about leap months?" Everyone groans. You step away slowly, like from a smoldering fire. Later, you find yourself seated in the shade beside a cracked wall, where an old man and his daughter play a game with tiny stones and etched lines. He glances at the sundial in the distance and smiles. "Still arguing about shadows, I see." You ask how he tells time. He taps his wrist, then laughs. "No, I listen to the birds." He points to a small swallow on the ledge above. "When she sings once, it's morning. Twice, it's almost night. If she sings thrice, it's feast day." You ask if that's accurate. "Not at all," he grins. "But it's never wrong." Back at the sundial, the priests finally seem satisfied. A child marks the new line with a reed dipped in ink. The sun leans against the dial like it knows better. You smile, stand, and walk toward the street. Time may be slipping, tilting, drifting. But you're right on schedule. You're nudged awake by a loud voice shouting, "Dates don't move themselves, boy!" And you sit up groggily in the corner of a shady square, where something very unexpected is happening at a protest. Not a riot, nothing dramatic, but a full-on, tablet-waving, stylus-shaking, scroll-thrusting rebellion, led by astronomer apprentices and angry scribes, all marching with the sluggish determination of people who stayed up too late arguing about moon phases. The cause? The new calendar proposal. Apparently, someone in the Temple Council wants to eliminate Second Ululu again. Yes, the very bonus month the king added just a few weeks ago. The reasoning? Confusion among merchants. The result? Chaos among scribes. One particularly passionate apprentice shouts, "Time is not a suggestion." Another waves a placard that reads, "Don't erase my moon." You trail along as the crowd heads toward the administrative quarter, chanting things like, "Down with leap logic," and "30 is plenty." Someone hands you a palm leaf with hastily etched calculations showing why a 13-month year is astrologically sound. You nod, mostly because you're not entirely sure what astrologically sound means, but the leaf smells nice. Historians still debate how political Babylon's calendar truly was. Some argue the priests had full control, inserting leap months as needed to realign the seasons. Others believe pressure from farmers, merchants, and even star watchers often forced adjustments. Today, it's the scribes who've had enough. You reach the temple gate, where a senior priest stands with arms crossed. He listens. He sighs. Then, in the flattest tone imaginable, announces, "Fine. Second Ululu remains." A cheer erupts. Someone throws dried figs into the air. You catch one, bite into it, and immediately regret it. It's ancient and possibly cursed. The crowd disperses slowly, muttering about petition drafts and never trusting an eclipse chart again. One scribe drops a stylus and says solemnly, "This is for the 7th day," before walking into the sunset like a tragic hero. You find yourself back at the ziggurat steps as a few apprentices etch the news into a public clay board. Second Ululu reinstated. All dates move forward, except holy ones, or unholy ones. Details to follow. You ask one of them, "What happens if we change it again next week?" He shrugs. "We make more tablets." That's Babylon. Nothing is permanent, except maybe confusion. You sit on a warm stone, watching the sun tip westward, and wonder how many versions of the calendar are floating around the city right now. 4? 6? One tailored just for goats. Time isn't fixed here. It's negotiated. A social contract drawn in clay and revised often, preferably before lunch. As you lean back, a boy runs by waving a tiny banner that reads, "I love Ululu 2. You chuckle. You may not know what day it is anymore. But you're right on time. It's nearly dawn, and the air smells like river mist and overripe dates. You're sitting in a tiny fishing village on the far edge of Babylon, close enough to smell the incense from the temple on windy days, far enough that no one here owns a star chart. The villagers here don't care what Venus is doing. They don't check sundials. And they definitely don't recognize second Ulialu. You sip warm barley tea as an old man mends a fishing net beside you. He nods toward the horizon. Day starts when the light touches that palm tree, he says. Not before, not after. You glance at the tree. Its trunk leans east like it knows its job. You ask, what if a priest says it started 10 minutes ago? He cackles. Let him fish then. In this village, time is practical. No fancy divisions. No stylus math. Just the sound of waves, the weight of nets, and the moment light cracks across the water. Children race through the alleyways, shouting, "Sun's up!" Though the sun hasn't technically arrived yet. A woman begins sweeping her doorstep. A rooster announces himself with the sort of confidence only roosters possess. But the temple bell rings early. The villagers pause. Eyes narrow. Too soon, mutters the old man. They've moved sunrise again. The priests in the city have been recalibrating their dawn rituals based on Venus, lunar charts, and possibly stubbornness. But out here, that bell means nothing if the boats aren't floating. Historians note that many rural Mesopotamians lived by event-based time, the crow of a rooster, the return of a husband, the stretch of a shadow past the well. For these communities, time was relational, not universal. The priest may declare it morning, but until the fish bite, the village remains in twilight. You help launch a small reed canoe. A boy, no older than 10, hops in beside you and starts paddling like he's done this 1,000 times. If we're back before the sun is overhead, he says, we'll eat warm lentils. You nod. Sounds reasonable. Out on the water, the horizon glows, and the sky turns orange-pink, like papyrus dipped in honey. Birds call. The paddle splashes gently. Time stretches. Not in minutes, but in moments. Later, when the canoe bumps against the shore and the fish are flopping in your net, the old man smiles. Perfect timing, he says. See the tree. You look. The shadow has just crossed its roots. You nod. It's morning now. You carry the fish to shore and hear the temple bell ring again. This time, on schedule. The boy rolls his eyes. They're late again. You laugh. Back in the city, priests are probably debating the angle of Venus, the tilt of the gnomon, and whether today needs a second sunrise. But out here, the palm tree knows. Evening settles across Babylon like a silk veil, soft and gold-edged. You're walking through the western quarter, near the incense vendors, when you hear flute music drifting from a rooftop. It's the kind of night where time walks barefoot. You pass a scribe scratching something furiously into a clay tablet. You pause. He looks up, eyes wide. It's wrong, he hisses. The chart is wrong. You raise an eyebrow. Which chart? He thrusts the tablet toward you. The star chart. The one that says when the new festival starts. I copied it from the master tablet. Exactly. But the stars moved. You glance at the heavens. A clear sky. Venus gleams near the horizon, smug as usual. A familiar constellation leans awkwardly above the rooftops. It's not where it should be. At least, not according to the tablet. Apparently, tonight was supposed to be the start of the festival of Lamasta's Veil. Candles lit, songs sung, goat-shaped cakes passed around like gossip. Instead, the sky has shifted. The problem? The festival's timing is based on a specific star rising in a specific place on a specific night. And tonight, it rose early. Or maybe the chart was late. Either way, the city is divided. You pass one courtyard where candles are already burning, neighbors clapping to a song about desert winds and fertility. A few doors down, another group is still preparing decorations, their priest shouting, "We wait for the second blink of the goat star." Historians note that while Babylonian astronomy was impressively advanced, it still wrestled with the unpredictable wobble of Earth's rhythms. Precession, drift, and the natural irregularity of the heavens meant the stars didn't always keep appointments. Back at the rooftop, a woman is lighting candles anyway. The gods will understand, she says. They're busy. You ask how often this happens. She shrugs. About every third Lamastu. We celebrate twice. Hedge our bets. Down the street, a chorus starts too soon. Someone yells, "Not yet." The music pauses, then resumes anyway. There's fig wine involved now, so no one minds. You wander through overlapping festivals, one celebrating, one waiting. At a corner, a group of children race by with tiny paper lanterns, shouting, "Early stars, early sweets." You duck into a small bakery, where the smell of date cakes and sesame pulls you in like a spell. The baker is laughing. "We baked them already," he says. "Let the stars argue." You bite into a still warm goat-shaped pastry and decide he's right. Time, like the gods, is flexible when it's delicious. The stars may rise too early or too late, but the candles will always flicker, and someone, somewhere, will always celebrate. You're seated on the temple steps as the city exhales into night. It's quiet now. The stars are steady, the bells are done, and you can hear frogs croaking somewhere near the river. A gentle breeze carries the smell of baked brick, myrrh, and figs long since eaten. Beside you, a quiet man in a plain tunic is pouring a thin stream of sand between two glass vessels. You blink. You've never seen this before. "Hourglass," he says without looking up. "Doesn't leak, doesn't lie." You lean in closer. It's beautiful. The top bulb is half empty, the bottom slowly filling like a secret. The sand is fine, pale, and impossibly even. The flow steady, precise. You ask, "Did you invent it?" He shrugs. "I watched water too long, got tired of mopping." He introduces himself as a thinker, not a priest, not a scribe. Just a man who liked building things that listened more than they talked. He says he wanted a way to feel time, to see it pass without debating where the shadow landed or whether Venus is in the mood. "It's not for rituals," he says. "It's for thinking." Historians aren't certain when hourglasses first appeared, but this man doesn't care about that. "I'll break it eventually," he says. "Then make a better one." He hands it to you. It's surprisingly light. You flip it. The sand begins again, and your breath sinks with the soft pour. You sit in silence for several minutes, maybe 10, maybe one. He breaks the quiet. "You know why this is better than the clepsydra?" You shake your head. It doesn't pretend to be exact, but it keeps going, even when no one watches. You smile. "So it's honest?" He nods. "Honest, quiet, and too slow for arguments." You thank him, and he leaves you with the hourglass in your lap. You watch the last grains fall. The moon rises, thin and silver as a priest's sigh. You're not sure what time it is, but the hourglass doesn't mind, and neither do you. You wake beside the Euphrates, your head nestled against a rolled-up tunic, the air still warm from the day. The sky above is a deep, endless indigo scattered with 1,000 familiar stars. The river flows slow and thick beside you, whispering secrets to the reeds. You stretch, not entirely sure how long you've been asleep, or if it matters anymore. Across the bank, a goat bleats half-heartedly. Somewhere behind you, a clay bell rings once, then forgets to ring again. It doesn't matter. Because time in Babylon has melted into rhythm. Not clockwork, not calculation. Just a hum beneath your feet, your breath sinking with moonlight and temple chants drifting from far away. You trace circles in the sand with your finger, 60 parts to a whole. 3 watches in a night, a dozen months, sometimes 13. But when the stars argue, when priests debate, when the goat shadow is slightly off, no one panics. They adjust. They smooth the clay. They flip the chart. They try again. You remember the water clocks, the stubborn sundial, the palm tree calendar by the river, the man with his sandglass and soft voice. In this city, time was never a fixed thing. It was a conversation, a collaboration between stars and barley fields, between temples and traders, between priests and very opinionated fishermen. Historians still argue whether Babylonians invented time or just found new ways to listen to it. But sitting here, with sand in your sleeve and the river humming like a lullaby, you realize it doesn't matter. What matters is that time moves with you, around you, Sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, but always, always with you, you lie back. The stars blink, slowly and sweetly, and you think of Venus, late again probably, and the goat that ate the first sundial string. You smile, you close your eyes, time sighs, and everything waits. Let your breath slow now. There's no need to measure it. No charts to check. No bells to listen for. Just the sound of the river, gently winding past the sleeping city. Soft as a song only the moon can hear. You're lying in a place where time was born. Not in seconds or minutes, but in whispers and questions. In shadows that didn't always agree. Where people argued not to be right, but to understand. Where a shadow on a tile could mean lunch, or prayer, or simply that it was time to pause. Feel the cool earth beneath you. The softness of the night above. You've wandered through starlit ziggurats and clay-dusted classrooms, shared figs with scribes and fishermen, watched the sun and the sand and even the stars get a little confused, and it was all okay. Because time was never supposed to be perfect. It was always meant to be human, so let your shoulders soften now. Let your thoughts drift, like ink in water, like Venus showing up when she feels like it. Let the moments pass without needing to name them. You're part of the rhythm now. And the rhythm is gentle. A final breeze rustles the reeds. The clay cools, and the river goes on. End of script. Sweet dreams.